Hello everyone and welcome back to another pre-recorded lesson video. We are nearing the end of module 1. We only have one more lesson to go, lesson 33. But today we're going over lesson 31 and 32. And the main thing for this lesson that we're going to be going over is getting started on your 9-week major assessment, right? Y'all are writing 3 poems and a cover letter, and I think the most important thing is getting started, right? It's hard to get started, especially in writing, and I'm going to try to help y'all out with that, okay? So that's the main thing that we're going to be going over today, because remember, we only have one grade left in this class, and it is that 9-week major assessment. So here we go. So some announcements. Grades are due before midnight on Thursday. That's the last day to turn in grades, so get that everything turned in. And if you have a lot of missing assignments, I would focus on getting the major assessments turned in yet. If you have not, there's only a handful of you that have not turned in the week 3 and week 6 major assessment. So get that done. STAR testing is still due this week. So if you have not done STAR testing, come into the office hours for either the morning or the afternoon, and we can get that done. It's very quick and easy. It should only take you 20 minutes. So just come in and we can get that done for you. And then if you have still not picked up the physical copy of the book, please come to the front office at school to get that. If you're coming in person for the second 9 weeks, then you really don't have to worry about it that much, because we'll just give it to you when you're here. But if you know that you're going to stay virtual for the second 9 weeks and you still don't have the books, come up to the school. They're at the front office, and they'll give you the book for module 2. Because remember, module 2, you're going to need the book for. It's a different book, and I can't find the online copy yet. So please make sure that you get that done. Remember, no school on Friday or next Monday. Y'all have a nice 4-day weekend. So just make sure that everything is turned in by that Thursday, okay? So the learning goals for this one, it's really just getting started with that 9-week assessment and making sure that y'all have a set plan of what you want to write about, and you are creating a narrative arc for your story, and that you're following the specific poetic types and the characteristics of it, okay? So let's get started and just jump right into it. This may be a shorter lesson video than usual. That's just because the main thing I want to get across is your major assessment and what you should be writing about and how you should be structuring it, okay? So again, the important questions, the main one that you really need to focus on is, what does it mean to be a storyteller? Because you're going to be answering that question in your cover letter, right? And why, what you're basically going to be answering is why you decided to tell the story that you did, and how the poetic structures that you wrote about and the content helped you tell that story, okay? So let's get into it. So the main things that I want to get across today is that you need to complete a draft. A draft is basically putting down all your ideas, not really worrying about grammar or spelling, anything like that, just making sure that you have your ideas out, you have what you want to write about, the structure you want to put it in, and the poetic types that you want to use, okay? And then I'm going to teach you how to basically revise it a little bit. And for office hours, please come before you submit the assessment, so that I can make sure that you're doing it right, that you're heading in the right direction, and that you're checking off the boxes on that checklist, right? Also, if you show up to office hours, for me to check your assessment, your writing, I will give you extra credit on it, so that we can bump up that grade a little bit, right? So it's a little bit of incentive to come into office hours. I will give you extra credit. So I'm going to show y'all a handout that I forgot to give y'all yesterday. That was my bad. And this handout's super important. This one right here. It was in yesterday's folder, and it's in today's folder as well. This is the planning packet for your assignment. So as you can see, step 1 is basically giving you brainstorm ideas, some ideas that you can write about. So you can write about a time you witnessed something you knew was not right and you did something about it, a time that you felt misunderstood and how you responded to the misunderstanding, a time that you experienced a conflict with your family member or friend and were able to resolve it, a time you attempted something difficult, faced challenges, and learned from your experiences, right? And then this just gives you a chart of the experience that you want to write about and putting in order, essentially, right? And this gives you a beginning, middle, and end. Because remember, in your poems, your 3 poems, there has to be a beginning, middle, and an end with a common theme to put everything together. Because remember, that is a big part of your grade, is having a set narrative arc in your writing. So an example of if I was doing this assessment, what I would write about is my journey to becoming a teacher. Right, it was very difficult. I faced a lot of challenges. Right, so for the beginning, I would write about the job I had before I became a teacher and why I didn't like it. Right, and in the middle, I could for the conflict, I could write about my journey into quitting that job and being on the journey to become a teacher. Right, I overcame a couple of challenges for it, and for the ending, I could write about my first day as a teacher or the first week as a teacher. Right, completing that journey, overcoming all those obstacles I had to face, and eventually making it to my end goal. Right, and the common thread is following your dreams and following your passions. Right, so you see a clear beginning, middle, end, a common theme or a common message that is tied throughout the beginning, middle, and the end. Right. So that's just something I would write about. You could easily do that with what you want to write about as well. And remember, if you need help just getting started with that, come into office hours. Message me on Schoology, email me, and I will gladly sit down and help you out with that. Okay? The next one, which I think is super important as well, is figuring out the poetic types that you want to use. Because a big part of your grade is the narrative arc and having a clear beginning, middle, and end. The other big part of your writing is having 3 different poetic types. So following the same example I used for the narrative arc, for the beginning, remember, is me quitting my job and deciding to become a teacher, right? Setting a conflict, setting my goal, and then, establishing the character. So the poetic type I would maybe use for that is maybe a list poem, right? Maybe I list out maybe I list out reasons that I don't like my job and that I want to be a teacher, right? And how that poetic type is helping helping out my writing with establishing the content and the purpose of it. It could be just, you see the list and you see why I want to move on from my job and follow this path of becoming a teacher, right? It gives out straight list and it gives you the motivation that I have. Then for the middle one, where it sets the journey that I went on to becoming it, getting my certificate, trying to get hired as a teacher, right? I would do a timestamp poem, right? Remember, a timestamp poem is where you have the date, a time, and the event that happened at that time and day underneath it, and you just have multiple dates and times, and it gives you a basically sort of like a calendar of the events that go on and how you're overcoming that conflict, right? So that's what I would do with it for the poetic type in the middle. I would do a timestamp poem of my journey from whenever I quit to getting my certificate and trying to get hired, right? So I would have a timestamp poem of all the major events that happened in the middle. And what that's showing is my journey to overcoming the obstacles I faced. And sorry about that long bell, but yeah, the timestamp poem would show my journey that I went on and show the major events that I went through and basically show the timeline of me actually overcoming all those obstacles and eventually reaching my goal. And for the ending of me, finally becoming a teacher and like showing my first day or how my first week went, I would do an occasional poem. Remember, an occasional poem is basically answering a question or a statement or responses to a statement, right? So the question, my title would probably be, how did your first week go? Right? That's the question someone asked me. And then I would do a list of responses to that question, right? And that would basically show my happiness and the decision I made, how happy I am being a teacher, right? And that basically put a nice ending, like a nice ribbon, and wrap up the story nicely, right? That is just some of the poetic types I would use for beginning, middle, end. Hopefully you're seeing that. And remember, this is just some of the poems that you found throughout the book, and these are examples of the poetic type. So for example of a timestamp poem, go to page 125 and 127 in your book, and look for the poem Game Time 6 p.m. That's going to give you an example of a timestamp poem, right? And what's really important about this is that you effectively choose the poetic type, but making sure that your poem actually follows that structure. So I recommend going back in the previous lessons where I introduced these poetic types to you for the first time, because remember, whenever I introduced it to you, I gave you a list of characteristics that those specific poetic types follow, right? So you need to make sure that your poem that you're writing and the poetic type you're choosing actually follows the characteristics of that poetic type, right? And it's not just you writing just to write. You need to make sure that the poem that you wrote actually has the same characteristics as that specific poem, that specific poetic type that you used, right? Because if you don't have the same characteristics as the specific poetic type, it's gonna be a lot of points off, right? And if you need help figuring out which poetic type that you should use, like you already have what you want your beginning to be, your middle, and your end, but you're just struggling with a specific poetic type with it, then let me know. And I am more than happy to sit down with you and choose a poetic type that would fit well with that structure and that story that you want to tell. Okay? So I highly recommend that you go through this packet and just, write down some of your ideas, because that's going to help you build a draft. It's going to help you brainstorm. It's going to help you organize your thoughts and put them on paper. So it makes it easier to translate your draft, all your ideas that you have, for your final copy, right? So that you're just not diving in head first and you're having trouble organizing everything, right? So I highly recommend you go through this. Another handout I forgot to give y'all yesterday is this. I also uploaded this in your folder. It is a handout to help you get started with your cover letter. So this basically breaks the cover letter down into 3 paragraphs, and it gives you a central idea and some supporting ideas that help out what your central idea of that paragraph of your cover letter is. So what you could do is I highly recommend you look at the cover letter example and sort of base your cover letter on this, right? So the main idea for the first paragraph is why Sarah Clark decided to write about the topic that she did, the background, and why she decided to title her portfolio a 1 in a million chance, right? And then she gives supporting ideas, some evidences that help support that central idea, right? So she gives the background story and how she decided to come up with that. That's a supporting idea. Then the central idea of the second paragraph is the different poetic types that she used and how it helps out the events that she wrote about and help out why she chose it. So some of the supporting ideas is the actual telling of why she chose that specific poem, that specific poetic type for that poem, and how it emphasized the events and how it emphasized the main idea that she wanted to get across. Then the last main idea, or the main idea for the last paragraph, is why her telling the story that she did is so important to her, and why storytelling is important in general, right? So I highly recommend looking through this handout and just organizing your thoughts. All these handouts are basically just going to help you brainstorm and create a draft, essentially, so that you at least have a template to go off of whenever you actually start writing your final copy, right? It's just going to be easier that way, and it's going to help you get started, because I think getting started is the most important and most difficult thing, okay? And the thing that I think y'all are going to struggle with the most, in my opinion, is choosing a specific poetic type and following that structure. So again, if you need help with that, just let me know. But that's basically what I wanted to go over in this class period, is setting over a draft and also getting, let me pull up the example poem. And also I want to show y'all how to revise and edit your things. So whenever you read through your draft, or whenever you're done writing your draft, your first draft essentially, you should go through it and edit it and revise it. Look for errors that you made, look for word choices specifically, and also look for figurative language that you could add or improve upon, right? Because that's another big part of your grade in this portfolio, right? Is specific word choices, right? Descriptive and sensory words, and figurative language. So this author does a great job of having figurative language. So you should read through your draft and see if you have figurative language in your poems. If you don't, mark specific places where you think you could put them in, right? And you should also, what you should be really looking for in revising is looking for specific poetic types, and see if you're following that exact structure, okay? That's what you should be looking for. That's what you should be revising for. And that's why I want you to come into office hours, because I'm going to be revising your poem for you, and just seeing what you could be working on, right? And improving upon so that we can get you closer and closer to that 100, okay? So remember, come into office hours for that. And for the wrap up, just make sure that you are answering in your cover letter the question, what does it mean to be a storyteller, right? Because remember, y'all are the storyteller now. You are telling a story about a specific or important event that happened in your life. So make sure that you're answering this in the cover letter, and you're telling us, or you're telling me why you decided to tell this story, right? Show up to office hours for extra credit, and before you submit the assessment, so that we can make sure that you're doing it correctly and that everything is in perfect order. Remember to turn this in Thursday before midnight. Remember to turn in any missing grades Thursday before midnight. If you have any questions, thoughts, or concerns, email me, come to office hours, question board, message me on Schoology, right? I am here to help you out. I am here to make sure that your writing is in a place that you want it to be, and that you are close to getting a perfect grade on this major assessment, okay? But other than that, that is it for this lesson. Bye.